Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Quinton Kutsia. I'm Relocation Africa's marketing assistant, and welcome to another of our African immigration interviews. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, our immigration lead, Lynn McKenzie, and we'll be discussing the current immigration landscape in Morocco. So, Lynn, thank you very much for your time. I'm looking forward to hearing about what is happening with Moroccan immigration.
Thank you so much, Quentin. Yes, so I'll be sharing with you some information that was sent to us by our wonderful partner who assists us with immigration support in Morocco. Her name is Danny Claveau, and she has been working with us for many, many years. And unfortunately, she couldn't be with us today, but she was gracious enough to send us some information so that I could share with our listeners about the immigration landscape in Morocco. So just to start us off, I want to just talk a little bit about our Danny. She is a French national. She has settled in Morocco for the last 15 years. Her background is in a military engineering company where she worked. And she now has had the opportunity since about 2005 to work in Morocco and participate in the creation of ACO, which is dedicated to expatriates settling in Morocco. So that is why she is definitely competent in this area, has again been helping us for many years. And in fact, Danny is also an expatriate herself. So she's been through the process, she understands the policies and procedures that are in place, and she has for the last 15 years living and working in Morocco. So we are excited to hear all that's going on there. So the company itself, again, is dedicated to helping expatriates settle into Morocco, but they also help with, besides immigration processes, they help with house hunting and settling in services. There's about 7 employees in the company that work with Danny, and so they expeditiously work on all these cases to administer the best and seamless procedures that can be administered for expatriates looking to relocate to Morocco. So yeah, let's fire away with some of those immigration questions, because that is why we're here today.
So first off, can you give us an idea of the current immigration policies and procedures in place in Morocco as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yes, absolutely. So Danny has mentioned to us that since the outbreak of the pandemic, obviously a lot of things have changed. So in the beginning of mid-March, there was the maritime and the land border closures that took pretty much everyone by surprise. There was a curfew that was put in place, very strict containment installed. There were checkpoints that made just any movement around the area just very, very difficult. Even though they had authorization to do so, the restriction just made it very difficult for people to actually just facilitate and move around as freely as they did before. The military was actually patrolling the streets to, I'm sure, assure that everyone is adhering to all the restrictions that were now in place, and everything had shut down. So everything was closed, and in Casablanca, which is known as the country's economic capital, according to Danny, looked like a ghost town. So no one was moving around, no one was doing anything. And the inner city connections that were occurring there also were suspended. So there's a train called the Al Barak. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Please comment below if I'm not. The high-speed train that connects Casa to Tangier, which is the jewel of modern Morocco, completely stopped. And that was for the first time in 15 years. Their offices at ACO had been shut down in all the years that Danny has been administering immigration services. So it has taken quite a knock and quite a hit on their policies and procedures and just the overall quality of life in Morocco right now.
Great. Are the local immigration authorities operating at the moment? What is the sort of status of processing, if any?
Our understanding is that everything is in full operation. Danny is assisting us with extensions currently, whether it be residence or work permits. However, during the lockdown period, tax and banking services did continue to work, but since about June, she said the police services of the prefectures had finally reopened and allowed expatriates to finally regularize their situation. So for those people who don't know, the police clearances, police records, and all of that is quite vital to the procedures that need to be administered and facilitated with regards to immigration. So having all of that back up and running has definitely helped our clientele get their work permits again, be able to apply for residence permits if they need police records, which again is now a new part of the process.
Perfect, thank you. Are there any concessions or directives that have been adopted by the government of Morocco for expats who are stuck in the country?
So it's quite impressive, actually, because we are of the understanding, basically, that they have been making concessions and directives that expatriates that are stranded within Morocco, whose documents may have expired during this time, they have their entry visa validity extended by 6 months. So that's really great news. There's a lot of jurisdictions out there that are not as gracious or are giving those types of concessions to that amount of time. So Morocco seems to be working together with immigration providers and immigration authorities and coming together to find solutions for those who are stuck and can't return home at this point, and of course because the borders are closed at this time. So expatriates whose work permits assignment was completed and they were finally able to complete their departure formalities in compliance with the legislation. So all of those they're working really well together with expatriates that are trying to really figure out the best way for them to be in the country and remain in status, because that is the ultimate goal, that they're not penalized, if they happen to leave and then they cannot return. So that's currently what the concessions as they stand.
Perfect. And how would these concessions affect foreigners who are outside the country, whose visa or permit applications have been approved, but they're unable to travel? What would the advice be in that kind of situation?
So, they say that it's a little tricky because you need to have your work permit and you need to have your residence permit. And the residence permit is really the most important in a jurisdiction of Morocco. So, she shared with us that the problem remains. So even if expats hold a work permit, even if they just had a lease at this point, and they really only holding people that have residence permits. So residence permits is really the key. They are the ones that are allowed to come back in, obviously once the borders open. But without a residence permit, it doesn't matter if you have a work permit. You cannot be in the country and remain in status. So it's really a difficult time for those expats whose residence cards have expired during the pandemic. So so that's really the current situation with regards to those concessions for those that are just unable to travel and they're coming from outside.
And are immigration authorities being lenient at the moment in terms of requirements? For example, are things being waived for people who are stuck in the country and want to remain in status?
So we've been told that in Morocco, the prefecture has made efforts to understand certain, they call them files, but really they're just cases, without questioning sort of every single detail. So in hindsight, they are sort of not necessarily overlooking or giving waivers, but they are not looking at everything in great detail. On the other hand, Danny has shared with us that when services are reopened with these files or these cases, the process is actually moving quite quickly. So there's the ANAPAC, which is the part that manages the recruitment process. That's still at the moment apparently being quite lenient. So the files are sent by email. We're in a time now where most things are being done online, and authorizations for hiring a foreigner are just sent back by email. What's also great is at this time, now we're talking about this new normal of application processes with regards to immigration, is originals at this time are no longer required. So no originals must be produced at this time during this pandemic. I'm sure we'll get more updates from Danny and the team once borders open and things resume to a new normal. But at this stage, you can still do your applications. You don't need to have your originals right now. They will accept, other forms of supporting documentation for your application. So that's really great news in that regard.
Thank you. And are any particular industries favored at the moment for processing of work visas or permits?
Danny says that all companies and industry sectors are really treated pretty much the same. So by the Ministry of Employment. So companies with what they call a CFC status, which is called Casa Finance City, is the procedure which assists with work permits. So she was mentioning to us that that process has been really simplified right now. And so again, not much differentiation between companies or sectors. Everyone is on an equal playing field. Everyone has a chance to apply and to obviously hopefully be approved for being able to bring their foreign employees into the jurisdiction. So the CFC status concerns also only companies that are establishing themselves in Casablanca. So those are for particular companies. But as far, again, as to favoritism, it doesn't seem like there's anything like that in Morocco.
Great. And what would the recommendation be for companies who want to plan for the future in terms of business establishment, staff movement, that kind of thing?
At this point, and my conversation with Danny was interesting because I think just in general, immigration providers and governments and people that are administrating and trying to advise on what to do as we move forward is people need to plan, obviously, plan in advance. Morocco is known to have a very long application process. So plan in advance, come to Relocation Africa. We will advise you on exactly your timeline, keep you abreast on all the changes that are happening with regards to where we are now, when the borders will be opening, what you're looking to do, how long you're looking to be there. And we'll be able to advise you particularly with regards to your timeline so that you can have a seamless application process and be able to fulfill your objectives. So just to go back really quickly, Danny also mentioned to us that it is possible to obtain work permits before arrival of expats in Morocco, but as long as the borders are not open at this time, that will not be possible. And also, again, the citing of non-resident foreigners, you have to have that resident permit to come to Morocco. So there's all of these restrictions right now, but that doesn't mean that businesses can't plan ahead. We are looking at a very optimistic side of things. As we're moving forward, we know that things may not go back to where they were, but people will move again. People will go on assignments again. And so Danny was very optimistic that things right now may be a little difficult, but she's slowly seeing some changes happening. So in response to that, it is a good idea for companies to plan ahead, to establish exactly when they want to relocate to Morocco.
Thank you. And should businesses be more flexible in terms of planning for future investment opportunities, considering things are constantly evolving going forward?
I mean, now's the time and I understand that there's times where certain projects are very time sensitive. Time is of the essence, and from a contractual perspective, it's very important. But at these times, I think that a lot of just globally, everybody is looking to be more flexible, I think, and also to work with each other to make sure that these projects or secondments happen, and they happen as seamlessly as possible. And again, there's a fulfillment of the objective of what the company, the business, or the foreign employer is looking to do in a particular location. Especially in Morocco, it's the same outlook that Danny has shared with us. And so, yes, I mean, be flexible maybe in your start dates, be flexible on how long your secondments may be. You've got to take all of those into account, as well as, there's so many new, there's new implementation happening of certain procedures, particularly with regards to COVID. So you're now having, in Morocco, for example, Danny was sharing with us with the police records, sharing with us about health screenings, and you're going to have, all of these extras before you're able to live and work in the jurisdiction. So that in itself requires everyone to be as flexible as possible.
Right. Well, that's sort of the end of our batch of questions. Is there anything that our partner wanted to add for our listeners within the parameters of this topic?
So just in light of what I just mentioned, with all these new, policies and procedures as a result of COVID, just from, a health perspective, those are now going to be requirements for your immigration application. So she said the under-equipped hospital system has pushed the Moroccan authorities to take these particular measures, strict measures, to be extended until the 10th of September. But which has made it a little difficult, of course, for people who are wanting to really get the ball rolling on going and moving into the jurisdiction. But she's also, she also shared with us that because things are very unknown right now, the government authorities are really trying to do their best and to take those procedures that they can to implement that, but also cognizant of what's happening in the world. So everybody's in a rock and a hard place at this point, but she definitely has shared with me her optimism. She is very motivated. She's very excited, even though Morocco is still under restriction, but she and her team, they're working very, very closely with the government authorities, working very closely with those that are open to suggestions and advice on how to make and reintroduce once everything reopens again with regards to immigration, and of course to make sure that all citizens of Morocco are safe and healthy, and of course to be able to protect the jurisdiction as best as they can, but also to encourage people to come in, to work, foreigners to come and work, foreigners to come and invest, start your businesses. They also want that as well. So I know myself, when I was speaking to Danny, she feels exactly the same way, that she is very optimistic that things will come back as normal as they can be under the circumstances, but not necessarily all for the negative.
Great. Well, thank you. And thank you again for taking the time to join me today. I hope our listeners find this information on Moroccan immigration interesting. And it's nice to hear that the Moroccan government is taking a balanced approach as they open things back up again. So thank you, Lynn, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.